talking about going from Zoom to Facebook Live.
I don't
This
see
is,
the three dots, but okay, that's okay.
if you don't have the three dots, or when that might mean that your computer doesn't have the bandwidth or strength to do it. Because on Zoom, if your computer's strong enough, you should
Hmm.
have three dots. My old computer didn't have the three dots. So it says, you got the microphone, the camcorder, security, lights, all those things. And right before you get to the end live stream, there's three dots. If your computer is strong enough to go to Facebook Live, you'll have three dots.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, looks
And
like we're live.
My old Chromebook wasn't strong enough. That's why I had to take an iPhone and bootleg myself to get to Facebook
Hmm.
Live.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Facebook people. Irwin Loring's in the house. He's so nice to let me redo this on good equipment. So let's welcome this amazing headliner out of the East Coast and find out what he's like. What is he all about? What got him into comedy? What's he up to? He had an anniversary yesterday. Let's chat.
I did.
Hi, Irwin.
Hello there, Linda. How are you?
Hi. Welcome back for a redo.
I'll read the take two.
Yes. Let's resume through your entire life.
My entire life. What is this, like a hypnotist, or let's go back to your child? Oh, not a hypnotist, a psychologist.
Let's do that. You had an
Okay.
anniversary. How many years have you been married?
Married 6 years. We've been together for 16.
Oh, wow. So you had a little anniversary party amongst yourselves. Do you how
Amongst
many
ourselves.
children how many children do you have?
We have a blended family of three, all adults.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah,
you get
25,
to
25, 21, 22. Sorry.
and the children are up living elsewhere in another state or same state or
Oh, don't we only wish? No, one is in the room about 20 feet from me is his bedroom. There's one upstairs. The other one's in Colorado, though. The one that graduated, we have one that graduated from CIA in Poughkeepsie, and he's now a cook out in Colorado.
What is CIA and why did my mascara get all over my face? Because I took a nap and woke up. CIA sounds like a secret service.
Yeah, it's not, though. It's not.
Oh,
CIA is the Culinary Institute of America.
very good. So one is going through that or
He,
graduated?
he graduated. He got
Graduate.
his bachelor's in culinary arts last December, and he went out to Colorado. He's in Aspen, Colorado. Has been there now for a few months. He's got a full-time job.
Does he have one in a prestigious place in Aspen?
I think the first place he worked in was like a resort, and then that's closed for the summer. So now he's working in another restaurant that's in Aspen. But he said his first person he served was Leonardo DiCaprio. So it was kind of interesting.
Oh, how cool is that? Is so cool.
Yeah, he was pretty excited.
Yeah. And then has he run across more people at that level?
He said he has. I haven't asked him who though. I didn't want to get into all that.
So he's one child that's out there working in Colorado, and the other two, what careers are they pursuing?
Uh, the essential middle child, my son, he works with podcasts and producing different videos and things like that. He's been doing all right with that. And then the oldest, the daughter, she's actually right now, because of her company shut down, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. So she's looking for work.
Looking for work. What type of work does she do?
She was actually involved with a yoga studio, but it closed.
Okay. Okay, so let's go into your life.
All right. What you got?
Tell me where you grew up. You've told me, but I can't remember. Tell me where you grew up and how early in life you were funny, some of those early stories where people told you or you knew you were funny.
Well, where I grew up is I was born on Long Island, New York, in Long Beach. But then I went to Levittown. But really, most of my life was spent in a little town in upstate New York, in Ulster County, called New Paltz, New York. For those people who know where it is, it's a very hippie town. Most people say that town was created when all the people from Woodstock in the 1960s couldn't find their way home, and that's where they ended up. They were a little too done. So you still see tie-dye T-shirts and mostly skate shops and head shops and things, and there's the mountains. So it's a pretty eclectic little town. It's a great place. But I grew up and graduated high school there, and then went to college in Albany, New York, and somehow ended up in Maryland after that.
And then you went to college in Albany, New York. What did you study?
I have a bachelor's degree in communications.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah.
Both you and your podcasting son probably know all the mistakes I made the first time we went around this.
Oh, I think most people knew the mistakes you made the first time you went around this.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. All of season 1 of my stuff was like for trash. But
Well,
we're in season 2.
when you're taking a video with your phone of a computer screen, you're really not going to get the effect of it that you want.
Not at all. I finally, one person told me this is not the way to do it, and I'm not coming on your show until you fix this.
Yeah.
So I went and fixed it because I wanted him on the show.
Well, that'll do it. Yeah, no, we do a podcast called Stories and Stogies, myself and 2 other hosts, and we interview guests on the show, and we have, like, my son, who helps us produce it, has made us get all this professional equipment. We're not doing it on phones. We have microphones, and it's crazy. And we're actually getting ready to take our first break, and then we're going to take a break for a couple months, and then we're going to come back and do a video as well as audio.
Wonderful. Awesome. I got me a new microphone here. It's a 2-piecer thing. I'm so happy. I'm getting little by little every month. I'm getting more and more professional equipment. And it makes me feel so legit.
Oh, you got to feel legit about something in life, don't you?
Yeah. Tell me about your podcast, Stogies and Stories.
You got it backwards. It's called Stories and Stogies. I co-host along with 2 other comics, Mark Matusoff and Ken Water, both from the Maryland area. Mark lives in Virginia, and we interview people from different places. We've done comics, we've done some people from TV. We're getting ready to do some people from the sports world, and we really want to give people a chance to learn about the person behind the personality, because like we just did an interview with Michael Winslow, and everybody asks him, okay, what was the first sound you did? But we asked him questions about him, about his other things he's interested in, and, where he came from and where he grew up. And it's a little more interesting, not interesting, that's unfair, because any interview can be interesting. It's a little bit more in a different direction than your typical interview is the goal. But, we had we've had Kevin Farley, and we've had some people you may never have heard of, which were interesting to interview too.
That's really cool. I like the way that you have a certain approach to taking people and having a unique way of interviewing them. My whole goal is to expose who a comedian is behind the mask. Like, what are your personal interests? Tell us what your day is like through questions that I ask, that kind of thing. And this has been just something that I have grown to love more than sleep itself.
You have to love it, because it doesn't make any money.
Yeah, so true. So you started, how young in life did people tell you were funny, or how did that appear in your life?
I don't know what the perfect answer to that is, because I wanted to be a comedian when I was 16 years old. I lived in New Paltz. I mean, we had just gotten cable TV in 1980. That reveals my age a bit. But we had just gotten cable TV, and one of the things we got was HBO, and that was the beginnings of HBO. And one of the first comedy specials that was advertised on it was by David Brenner. And I fell in love with David Brenner's comedy right away. And I told my mother one day, I'm like, I want to do what he does. And that's when I was 16. But so, 24 years later, when I was 40 and finally tried to take the stage, there was a long gap between the desire and the result of going on stage.
Did you ever get to meet David Brenner?
No. I did work with a guy, Joe Bronzi, who was the feature for David Brenner for 5 years. And he was trying to help me meet with David Brenner. And unfortunately, David Brenner passed before I got to meet with him.
Absolutely. That was sad. Okay, so I have a little story. Did I tell you, had you related the David Brenner scenario to me before?
Yeah, I think I discussed it the last time. I don't know what other story. Yeah, that was on the first interview. Unfortunately, people who saw that too. But yeah, I mean, I got to meet him though. I mean, I got to meet him indirectly. I mean, he performed at my college when I was in college, and he actually performed at a local synagogue in Maryland. a number of years ago, and I got to meet him there, but that was about it. I didn't get to like talk to him or hang out with him. That was
Okay,
before comedy, before I was in comedy.
absolutely. So remember when MySpace came out in 2003, I think it was?
Yeah, unfortunately. No, yes, I do.
Maybe before that. Well, he was on MySpace talking to people.
Was he?
And I was writing to him saying, I'm thinking about becoming a comic. And I would send him jokes and he would reply. And every once in a while it would pop up in my Facebook memories because I cut and pasted it off of there, the
Oh,
thread.
really?
Yeah, I got to talk. So I met him at the Golden Nugget here in Vegas where I live now. I met him.
Right.
I was at a counter and watching a video on a screen at the Golden Nugget of him
Hmm.
in the doing comedy. And I thought,
Yeah.
I was always enamored with David Brenner, anything. And I was watching his video and he was performing over there somewhere. And I kept watching it over and over because he was just looking at a newspaper making people die laughing.
Yeah. Well, he had that joke about the newspaper that he did. It was one of his classic jokes. The one with the sitting on the newspaper. It's on the subway. That's a classic of his. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And the thing is, it's interesting is, when I worked with Joe Bronzi, that's how we met. He even said to me and that my style had kind of a similarity because I'm a joke teller. I do observational jokes. I tell, here's what I see, here's what I think, and it usually works. Um, I mean, it was happy when I started traveling more, especially, I mean, you saw me when I was out at Harvey's.
Yes.
I always worry when I go into new markets, are people going to get me because I'm an East Coast comic? But
Yeah.
it seemed to go really well at Harvey's too. So
Very well. Very well indeed. So I was there looking at the video over and over, and someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "How do you like that guy on the screen?" It was David Brenner.
that's funny.
Yes, I got to talk to him, and then I found him on MySpace after that and sent him jokes. But I never got on stage until 2013, so
Yeah.
a long time ago before that.
Well, that's what happens. Sometimes life gets in the way. I mean, I wanted to do it when I was 16. I didn't get on until I was almost 41.
What all did you accomplish in your life before you went to comedy?
Besides having kids, I guess that's an
Sure.
accomplishment.
Oh yeah,
Oh, let's see.
totally.
Before comedy, I got married and divorced once.
Me too.
I spent 20 years. I spent 20 years in retail as a retail manager for different retail companies, most of which, believe it or not, are out of business. So don't let me work for you. Yeah, I tell people the story of my career, and then they realize that every company I worked for is either out of business or close to it. And they're like, "And I work at the same company as you now? That's not a good sign." So yeah, I guess I'm the killer of companies or something. I don't know, but I mean, I worked for Montgomery Ward back in the late '80s into almost 2000 or 2001, I think. So I was
What'd
with
you do for Montgomery Ward? I worked for them too.
I was a store manager.
What
For the last 5 years, I was a store manager.
what city were you in?
I started in Maryland, down here in the Maryland, Virginia area. Then I went to Pennsylvania for a while in Pittsburgh area, and
Well,
then
I
yeah,
signed up people for credit cards in Portland, Oregon.
yeah, that was the greeter. That was always a tough position to be in.
I loved it. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah, we had those, and then after that, I just kept moving through between that. Then I went to Kmart for 5 months and got paroled. That was a horrible experience.
Now,
No,
why do you say you got parole?
oh, it was a horrible experience. I mean, there was not a day that I wanted to be there. I got convinced. I got convinced to follow the person I worked for at Montgomery Ward as my district manager. Convinced me that Kmart was going to change and I should go work there. And I was there for 2 months, I think, maybe three, and he quit. And so I was like, "You're thanks." So and I said, "Why are you quitting?" He goes, "Because it really sucks." I'm like, "Thanks for convincing me." And then so then I ended up after that. I went to Sports Authority, then Toys R Us, and then Toys R Us is actually where I met my current wife. She actually came in for a job interview, and I said, "Wow, this woman has got something about her," and I had to get to know her, and time did tell, and we've been married now for a while. So
That's amazing. That's a cool story. She
yeah,
applied for a job and then
yep.
now she's got job security.
Yeah, well, I always tell people. They said, "How did you meet your wife?" I said, "I hired her." So
So, what was the breaking point in your life where you said, "You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do comedy.
It was actually my wife. When we were first dating, let's see, it was 2000 and so we've been dating about a year or two at that point. And she said, "Is there?" We were talking about life and things we want to do, and I was just about to close down my. I was just about to leave Toys R Us myself and head to banking, which is where I am now. And she said, "Isn't there anything you always wanted to do?" I said, "I've always wanted to be a stand-up comic." And she said, "Well, why haven't you tried?" And it was an interesting thing to hear because my first wife was totally discouraging on the idea, and that's one of the reasons I didn't do it. And so she said, "Why don't you try?" So I looked up an open mic, and it was kind of funny because I didn't know that open mic comedy was a bunch of first timers, second timers like me. I thought these were relatively real comics, like these were people that did comedy. And so I went out there and they were all terrible. I mean, they were just god awful. And I said to my wife, I said, "Why am I doing this? Look, these people have been doing it for a while and they suck. Can you imagine how bad I'll be?" And she said, "You're funnier sitting in this chair right here than they are on stage. Just do it." And I wasn't planning to do it that night. I was actually just going to watch. So I turned to the guy who was hosting it. I said, "Okay, yeah, sure, I'll get on stage." He goes, "Good, you're next." And then I looked at my wife. I said, "What am I going to say?" She goes, "I don't know." And
That's so cool.
yeah, I went on. I was up there for about 3 minutes, and I didn't know how it works, so I was done. The people hosting the show were off somewhere else, and I'm just standing on stage going, "What do I do now? I'm done." And I was waiting, and everybody was laughing at me because I was like, "I don't know what to do now. I'm standing here. They were going to leave me there for 10 minutes, and I was like, I'm done after three." I mean, so finally they came running up and took me off stage, and I haven't stopped since.
How has your career in comedy grown? Like, how is your story of going through comedy, your trajectory different than others?
Well, I mean, being older when I started created some difficulties because when you're 41 and everybody around you is 18 to 23, they all think that they're the funniest thing that was ever created, and you're just trying to understand it. So they think you're this old man who's just doing nothing, and so there was a lot of hurdles along the way because I didn't know how to write a joke. I never took a class. I just guessed it a lot. I was lucky enough to hook on to some I was lucky enough to hook on with some of the professional comics that were out there who liked me, who kind of gave me advice and helped me along the way, asked a lot of questions. So the first few years I was working a lot, so I didn't get a ton of time to do show. No, my first 3 years I probably went on stage 100 times, um, and then finally about year four I started getting on more often, um, and I got fired from my job, and so I needed to work full time somehow. So I started doing comedy on a regular basis, and it was definitely a learning experience. I wasn't ready. One thing I can tell you is comics have to realize you're not always ready just because you can tell jokes. You got to be ready for a lot of other perspectives. There's a maturity involved. There's a stage presence involved. There's a way to present yourself. There's a way to deal with the bookers and the agents and the clubs, and you don't learn that by just going up 5 times a night on an open mics. You got to learn from the pros. And so from 2010 to 2012, I was getting paid more to do comedy, but I was still kind of featuring and doing other stuff. But after about 2013 is when I started featuring regularly. And then in the last year, I started mixing between headline and feature.
Wonderful. And what was it like the first time you were on stage um, as a feature and the first time as a headliner?
The first time on the feature was terrible. And I don't mean I didn't do well, but it was a difficult experience. It was I had a headliner who liked me and told me, "You're going to feature for me." I told him I only had 15 minutes. He says, "Well, the booking is not for 4 months. You got 4 months to get 15 more minutes." And I did it, but I ended up on stage the first night. It was in New York on Long Island, and there was a table of 20 people directly in front of me. And I found out afterwards it was a group of anti-Semites, and I, being Jewish, every time I told a joke that involved me being Jewish, they started heckling me, which made it difficult. So it was a very difficult. And the worst part was my family was there in the back watching, and they're like watching me just wonder why these people are calling me names from the seats. So that was a rough weekend. I mean, I did fine, but it was a rough weekend, and I made the decision that I needed to be more seasoned before I featured regularly. Um, my first headlining one was a little bit more interesting. I was booked to, I thought I was being booked just to close the show. So I thought I was doing like, a typical 30-minute, but just closing. And when I walked in, went up to the person running the show and I said, okay, so I'm closing, but who else is on the show? And he goes, oh, well, this guy's hosting, and but he's really new, so he's only doing 7 or 8 minutes. And this guy's featuring, but he's never featured before, so he's doing about 20 minutes. And I said, well, how long a show do you want? He said, I'm an hour and a half. So I started doing math. That was a lot more than 30 minutes. And I went up to my wife and said, I got to do an hour. And she said, you've never done an hour. And then I said, what's the material got to be like? And he says, oh, you got to stay away from the F-bombs and just kind of be PG-13. And the two people that went up on front of me were just filthy. So now we've got all the audience is really annoyed because they were all filthy. And then I come up and then the host forgot my name when he introduced me. So he's sitting there going, oh, now you're headliner. And he stops and he forgot my name. And I'm standing off to the side. And I'm like, I'm not telling you. You're going to have to figure this out. And he's just staring at me. I'm like, I'm not telling you. Figure it out. And I said, I'm mouthing to him. I'm on the poster. Like I'm the only person on the poster. So it was pretty. So he got my name out, and I went up and I started calling him by the wrong name the rest of the night. Just a mess. And then, but I ended up doing 52 minutes, and that was my first time. And it was the thing that's interesting is I now go back to the same place every year to headline. And the last time I was there, it sold out 230 people, and afterwards a lot of the people who came said they came because they knew I was coming back. So it's nice to see you get a following on it.
That's a wonderful story. Oh my goodness. What is it that what's your goal in comedy?
I think that's an ever-changing question for everybody, because when you first start, even as an open micer, you might walk out there as an open micer and say, oh, I just want to get on stage. And then I honestly didn't even expect to get past open mic stage. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to go up. I love to make people laugh. I mean, my wife will tell you I love to make people laugh. Anybody who's met me, my goal is just to make people laugh and make them laugh in a good way. I don't want to be insulting. I don't want to be, vulgar. I want to just make you laugh. And it was really funny because my first goal was just to get on stage and be able to do comedy occasionally. Then my goal became, well, I want to feature. So now then my goal became traveling. And so now I've been to, I think, 25 states. I repeat almost every club I work at, I get to go back to. Last time I was out at Harvey's, they said that the next time I come back, I can headline.
Yes.
And so, well, I'm waiting for them to give it to me now. I don't even know what their situation is.
Yes.
I mean, I've had chances. I've been asked for videotapes for TV shows. I've been asked for, I got a chance. I mean, I had an offer to do shows in Canada, which was nice. I still haven't gotten to Vegas, which is where I want to go because I have family in Vegas. But I've gotten lucky. I never expected to be where I am today. So it's hard to set a goal when every time you're kind of surprised by where you are.
Yes. Yeah. So if you were in it to arrive, where do you have a certain something you must accomplish before you go on to the next arena, before you pass away? Do you have something in mind? I know
that's a little morbid. Hey, I before know, you die, before you croak.
I have a certain thing I want to do before I pass away in comedy, and I just wondered if you do.
No,
it's simple.
Because I refuse to pass away. Are you kidding? That's very morbid. What are you doing?
I'm not going to pass away till I'm 120, so I still got time. But I got this one thing in mind. Yeah.
Before you croak.
I know, it's straightforward and morbid.
Right now, between the podcast, between traveling, I consider where I've gotten in comedy to be some of it I'm guessing some of it has to be skill at this point. There's a lot of people who never thought anything of my comedy, and then there's people who, when they meet me, think they love my comedy. I've gotten both ends of it, and that's what comedy is. Comedy, every comedian is not going to be for every person. Somebody's going to love you, somebody's going to dislike you.
Absolutely.
My goal is just if I have an audience of 150 people and I can get 120 or 30 of them to laugh regularly, and a few people don't like it, that's their problem. It's okay. Go find another comic.
That's right. There's plenty other comics out there. So, you're going to be, getting over the pandemic real soon and not dying. And so, You're gonna live past the pandemic. And
I would
what are
hope.
you? What?
I would hope.
I'm a little awkward at times. I get it, but when the pandemic ends, what are some of the first places that you want to get back on stage?
Well, we're actually we're the interesting part is we're going to be back on stage on Thursday.
Mhm.
We're doing a show here in this area, so really in Rockville, we're doing a show at a local distillery. So that's the first time on stage, and then I am looking forward to getting back to the West Coast. I am scheduled on the West Coast in November at a different club up in Washington State, but we'll see. I'm just looking forward to the. I'm looking forward to getting my sea legs back. I mean, I haven't told a joke on stage in a very long time now. It feels like, so I'm hoping to get my sea legs back first, and then we'll go from there. Uh,
Yes.
but
What's it like having a supportive wife and traveling? Because there's a lot of comics out there that may be single or may be married and don't have a supportive spouse.
well, I mean, I think anybody who is with somebody who is in entertainment has to either be supportive or get out. I mean, I don't think it's. I'm sorry, but if you, I know comics who could have today been brilliant comedians over the years. There's a couple of them that just they're amazing, and they've all but faded out of comedy because they have a tough spouse or they have a tough, nobody, they didn't get to live that dream. Um, I mean, my kids are older. My wife travels with me when she can. She's the one that pushed me to the stage. She's very supportive. I mean, I couldn't ask for more than that. There are times I'm sure, like, when I was out at the West Coast, when I was at Harvey's, and I know she would have loved to have been with me and she couldn't um, because she loves Oregon. But, that's not going to happen every time. Uh, but yeah, no, I mean, having a support, I think anybody who's the spouse or the girlfriend or the boyfriend or partner of anybody in entertainment has to understand what entertainment is. You shouldn't go into it. It's kind of, I've seen people marry comedians and then wonder why they're gone all the time. I'm like, and then you got to trust us. I know there's some people that aren't trustable. I get it, but you got to trust us. I'm not going to play around when I'm not with my wife. If anything, I look forward to getting home.
Yes. And there are comedians out there that are single and play around or married and play around, but there's a whole lot that you meet through the years of people that are very true to their spouses, you know?
Well, yeah,
So,
but I mean, how do you do that anyway? Your name is said on stage. I mean, if somebody, if you start screwing around, and they can post on your Facebook. I mean, I don't get it. I know comedians who do it, and I don't even have a desire to, but I still don't even understand ones to do.
yes, yes. Do you have any funny stories about weird, hard, stupid, or scary things that have happened in your comedy life that you'll never forget? You don't want to name the club or the person, but something happened in your experience that is a hilarious or a scary story or
Well, the story that I told you about when I headlined was really a funny moment. That was one that was just really funny to be sitting there and all of a sudden you know, this happens. I was traveling with a comedian though one time. His name is Marcus Brown, and he and I worked together a lot early on. And we were going to do a gig in this small town in Virginia, and we're driving up and down and over the mountains. And he says to me, he goes, I always feel like these back roads that you take, all of a sudden you're going to go over a hill and you're just going to pull into a city. Like they just suddenly pop up in front of you. And then all of a sudden the GPS said, you have arrived at your destination. And all we saw was a cemetery. And the worst part is the comedy show was in a bar that used to be the funeral parlor for that cemetery.
oh my
and,
gosh.
and he's sitting there like, okay, I don't know if I want to come to this. It was a good show, but it was funny. We both were just like, where's the town? Like, there's no town here. But that
what's
was
the
pretty funny.
what's the least amount of people you've done comedy for and the most amount? I always find that interesting. And how did it go?
The least was 7, but
How
the
was
least,
that?
it was a great 7. They were a family, and they laughed their tails off. But that was the one that was the one that got me though was I did a comedy club in Pennsylvania, and there were 9. And the only reason that one got me is because the headliner and feature, I was actually hosting it. This is back when I was hosting. And I walk in and there was only 9 people there. And the headliner walked in with an attitude and said, well, what's the least amount of people you'll do a show for? And the woman who I had just been talking to running the show said to me, she was asking me about it. What do you think we should do? We only have 9 people. I said, well, 9 people paid. I said, and I said, 2 or 3 of these people aren't even from in town. You can't give them free tickets. They don't live here. So I'd say you do a show. And so when he walked in, he said, what's the least amount of people you do a show for? And she turned and looked and counted the crowd. And she said, 9. And he was mad. Oh, he was mad. He was so mad. I hated working with him. But he was a real ass the whole time. He didn't even do his time, and he told the feature to do less time. And it was a really bad situation. But 9. And the funny part was afterwards, the audience loved me because I went up and I did extra time. I made sure they were having fun. And that's the thing with the small crowds. You got to treat them like it's a full room because they paid to be there. The largest crowd was, I think, around 1,000.
Wow. What was that like?
That was interesting. I was working with, because he really did the whole show. I was working with Michael Winslow, the man of 10,000 sounds, which he claims now is a lot more than that. But I was working with Michael Winslow, and it was a hockey arena. And we were in the middle of the hockey arena. Well, yeah, I think it was hockey or soccer, indoor soccer. And it was a charity show for the local, I think, Boys and Girls Club. And I'd never performed in such a long room or in a room with so many people. And I asked him, what's your advice? I said, I've never been in a room this deep and this many people. He said, it's real simple. He goes, wait. I go, what do you mean? He goes, after you tell the joke, wait for the laughter to reach the room, because what's going to happen is your voice takes a while to reach the back of the room, and then the laughter takes a while to reach the front of the room. So you've got to pause more between your jokes. And it's paid off. It paid off wonderfully. It was a great show, got a great reaction. And, beyond that, I mean, I've done typical comedy club stuff anywhere from, 300 people-ish mostly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen you kill at Harvey's.
That was fun. Harvey's was a lot of fun.
Well, and your humor is so relatable, and you're so patient with your jokes, and people feel a kinship to you. They're not up there looking at somebody putting on a dog and pony show. You're really yourself.
It is, but it's all true too. That's the thing. Everybody always asks me, because they'll ask about the jokes and they'll say, where do you come up with your jokes? And I'm like, they're true. I mean, they really happened. I mean, my kids ask the questions that I talk about. My mom really is disaster mom. Everybody, matter of fact, there's a funny story behind that. My mom, I've been telling the joke about disaster mom for years. And one day somebody got on Facebook, and I don't know how they found her, but somehow she was in one of she's commenting in one of my posts, and somebody else saw it and said something to her. And he said, wait a minute, you're disaster mom. And she said, in the flesh.
Oh my gosh.
So that was kind of funny.
Does your comedy come from anybody in your family, or the way you grew up, or?
Well, I think I tell jokes about all my family. I mean, I've got my mom, my dad, all my kids, my wife. My ex-wife has even got a couple of jokes in some of my sets.
I guess, like, when you were growing up, did somebody in your family inspire you, or someone would it, like, my dad is my inspiration for my comedy. Then I had early on watching the great comics of my era on TV.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of curious, outside of the people in your family who've given you great comedy stories, like, did anybody in your family constantly tell you you're funny and banter with you? Or?
Well, you have to remember, I'm a firstborn Jewish son. So my mother, of course, thinks the sun rises and sets on me. So she thinks I'm funny.
Yes.
The thing is that I was lucky. I grew up in a situation where we were all just kind of happy overall and joking around a lot. So my mother was always probably an inspiration when it came from that end of it, because she would just say the stupidest things that were funny all the time, and it was hysterical. We always talk about the story where my mother's driving down the road, and somebody tried to drive her off the road, not by purpose, but because we lived in the country, so the roads were winding and cars sometimes came into your lane. And so she ends up driving off the road, through somebody's yard, up through their driveway, back up on the road, and she just stares out the window of the car and goes, "Steve McQueen, look out!" And so things like that. You just realize that life. That's what makes you realize life is just silly and funny, and that's what gets you laughing. The first time, when my wife and I were, my wife is a big part of my set, because when we were dating, I grew up in a Jewish household with a meat and potatoes approach. My wife was my wife, who's my wife now. When we were dating, she was vegan, and I tell the story on stage about how on one of our early dates, we were just walking down the sidewalk, and out of nowhere, she just pushes me into a bush. And I mean, this, like, why are you pushing? And I'm lying in the bush, and I'm like, what the heck just happened? She goes, you almost stepped on a worm, because she loves life. Every life is sacred to her. And I'm lying there in the bush, and she's like, you almost stepped on a worm. And I just looked up at her and I said, I love you, because it was because how can you not love that? So those are things that create jokes, things that create jokes. Like my kids asking their silly questions when they were kids. It's part of the inspiration of jokes. Is just the biggest thing I tell people is, you see something funny, write it down. You never know, it might be a joke.
Exactly.
And that's what happens.
What about reaching back and helping younger comics? You've been helped along in your career by people you mentioned, not by name. So now that you're a headliner and you've got all this expertise, have you made a real purpose in life to reach around and give tips to somebody that bombs on stage or has a bad set or lack of confidence? Or is that anything that you feel comfortable doing for others?
I'll give you a yes and no answer. I feel perfectly comfortable helping people. As a matter of fact, I love the idea of helping people. I don't mind it. I'm more than willing to answer questions. I'm willing to watch sets. I don't watch videos, not a fan of videos. And I'm willing to give somebody feedback. But the thing with asking for feedback is, be prepared for what you're given as feedback. And so what you run into, I've found with a lot of the younger comedians, unfortunately today, and it's an unfortunate thing, is that they don't understand that there is advice. When you ask for advice and it's given, it's not given from a bad place. And so if some of the comments I run into, they'll say, well, what do you think of this? And I'll be like, well, I don't know that that's really what you want to say or what I'll do. And I give them some other thoughts, and they'll immediately dismiss me like I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, those are people I don't want to help. But then
Yes.
there's comics of all ages. I mean, there's been a couple of older comics who started late, and they'd ask me my thoughts, and I'd give them my thoughts, and they'd tell me I was wrong. And I'm like, well, why'd you ask for my advice if you're going to tell me I'm wrong? I've also had comics who thought I was crazy with the advice I gave them. I had one comic, I gave him some advice, and he sent me a message on Facebook like a month later apologizing because he thought I was nuts and totally wrong and completely out of my mind, and he told other people that I was wrong. And then a month later, he goes, I just realized how right you were, and I wanted to apologize for not believing you. So it goes both ways. I
Yes.
mean, I think if you want to learn, then you have to be willing to take the lessons, because you don't just learn from, a 10-year comic. You can learn from somebody who started 2 days ago, who just happens to have some nugget that you might be able to work off of.
Exactly. So true. And anytime anybody heckles anybody else, if I'm in the room, I'm looking at it from what could have been done by the comic to avoid the heckle. How could the comic have come out of the heckle better? I mean, you can learn from watching other people, listening to other people. I would much rather learn from somebody else's mistakes than my own.
Well, heckling is a whole different thing. I mean, you really have to learn when it comes to dealing with hecklers, is that if you make a heckler too relevant, they don't go away. And I think that a
Oh,
lot of people make the mistake of, if somebody heckles them, they immediately attack them. Sometimes those people will not realize they'll just think, oh, I'm just helping the show, and keep heckling. I think sometimes you have to realize that you have to wait for the right spot and make them realize what they've done is disruptive, or something that insulting them doesn't do it, embarrassing them. You're going to do that, but you got to do it in a professional way. Um,
yes.
and if they're just bad, if they're just really bad hecklers, the club needs to take care of it. They need to kick them out. I mean, that's just because when you have somebody really, a heckler you can deal with. A drunk heckler needs to be thrown out.
Yes. Oh, a drunk heckler is the worst. A lot of times it's a white drunk heckler lady. And
It,
those are
I've
like,
seen every end of it.
yeah, there's all kinds, but like we all, as women comics, when we get up there and get heckled, I think we're less reactive. Like, especially older women like myself, I had to work through years of being programmed that, you're a baby boomer. You just take what you're given. And now I'm like up there and like, listen, I put a lot of work into being here holding this mic. I'm not giving the floor in my head. I had to tell myself, I can I can do something nice to stop this, even though I'm a baby boomer. because we have
Well,
certain women have certain stops that they have inside their heads.
yeah, I believe that it's different. I mean, I've had different types of hecklers. I mean, I had the guy who when I tell a joke, he would think he could rewrite the ending better than me, and then you'd be like, well, I'm the one being paid to do this. I think I win, or And then there's if somebody really gets on my nerves, I'll start keeping track. So I'll start saying, they'll say something, I'll say something back. I'll go, I'm up 1-0. And then later on, they'll do it again, and I'll say something back, and I'll say, I'm up 2-0. And then at one point, like I've had one guy, I got one person get to 4. I said, look, I'm up 4-0. Do you really want to keep this up? Because you're just pissing everybody off. And then they were like, yeah, I guess I'll shut up now.
Wow, that's a great trick. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Who is somebody that you look up to that's still out there doing comedy that
Oh gosh,
that
that's a
you
long
admire so
list.
much? Not that you want your comedy to be like, but in the overall, the whole picture of being a stand-up guy or woman and a stand-up comic, who's somebody that you think is really stellar in the comedy scene all the way around?
Oh God. I mean, there's some just great people out there. I mean, I've known Chris Monty out of New York for years. He's great.
Isn't he
Um,
fabulous?
he's great, great guy, good person, always good to me. I've featured for him multiple times. Max Delcelli is probably one of the nicest people in comedy. Just super people. Maya DiGiorgio, I love Maya DiGiorgio.
Me too.
Um, and then the Tommy Lama. I mean, him and I have become good friends. I mean, nobody can be better than the Tommy Lama.
Nobody.
But he's been great and fun to work with. He came out here and worked with me for a couple of weeks, and then he also did my podcast, and we had a blast. I mean, I can go on. There's a long list of people that I just truly, really enjoy their company and and working. Scott Bruce out of Pennsylvania. He owns Wisecrackers Comedy Club. Has always been great. You know, Dan Wilson is probably the nicest guy in comedy.
Where's he out of?
He's out of PA. He does a lot of cruise ships. And then I miss Kevin Meaney horribly. I don't know if you know who Kevin Meaney was, but he died
I'm
a number of
friends
years
with
ago.
his daughter. Did you ever know Kate?
No, I didn't. But Kevin is just, to me, my wife and I loved Kevin. I mean, when he passed away, it was a very hard day for me. I mean, that
I'm
was
sorry.
yeah. Well, it was tough because I really liked him, and I was texting him the day before he died, which was really weird.
Yes.
So those, I mean, I've gotten lucky. I've got to work with a lot of great people. I mean, I have no. It's hard to knock it down. I mean, locally, I mean, I got Kelly Terranova locally, who lives in out of Annapolis. Rob Mayer, I've known him for a number of years. I mean, these guys are all good people. They're great comics, and nobody. I mean, they're the part of the road dogs.
Exactly. Holding up the whole comedy scene. I mean, we need to we need to really give props to the road comics. They're out there doing the hard work, leaving their family and different place every city,
Yeah,
every night a different city. And
I think
it's
I
got to
think
have a
anybody
passion.
I think anybody who takes the stage deserves the respect for taking the stage. It's what you do once you're on the stage that really gets you the respect in the business. I mean, there's some just real. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I don't work with what we call. I don't really tend to work with the assholes. I mean, it's just not my thing. I'll generally. I mean, I've been offered. I'll be offered a feature spot, and I know the person who's headlining. I don't want to work with them, and I'll say, "Hey, can I get a different date?" And usually, I don't tell them. I don't tell them why. I don't insult anybody. I don't pick anybody. I won't ever mention names of people that annoy me.
That's
I don't do
great.
that. It's not my nature. It's not what I believe you should do.
I love that. Now I've heard enough information from you to respect you even more. This has been for me, it's been a good interview. I think other people will have a lot to love you more on by listening to this.
Yeah. The only thing that's funny is we're still trying to decide about keeping the beard, because I don't remember. I'm usually clean shaven except for the mustache, and my wife says I don't hate it, and now I've got to decide if I'm gonna. But I don't know. I'm gonna play around and put some color in it just so it's not all white. But
I love the beard.
yeah, everybody wants me to keep it. I don't even know. I may do a Facebook poll: keep it or get rid of it. I
Yeah,
have to.
there you go.
Well, I got to go back to work. I mean, I've been working from home for the last. The pandemic's got me working from home for 4 months, but now my office will be opening back up July 6th, and I mean they're practicing social distancing, and there won't be any issues. But I'm finally going to go back to an office. And of course, then I got to decide what am I going to do.
So the office that you're talking about, is that your comedy office or a job?
Job.
Other side.
I'm a commercial loan officer. I do business loans, but I can work remotely. I was working when I was out at Harvey's. I was actually working. I was on my computer during the day and doing the shows at night.
Nice. A
Yeah.
commercial loan officer. Wow. I was in banking and they wanted me to teach people, teller to new account and loans, home
Yeah.
loans. And I didn't know anything about loans, but they had me teaching brand new people what loans were and how to do them without knowing how to do them. It was
Yeah.
the biggest sham ever. Don't
That's
ever
funny.
teach if you don't know what you're doing. It was a fiasco.
I can, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you shouldn't teach and you shouldn't train if you don't have that skill set. Some people, they said some people can teach and some people can't. It's okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think that if you're going to teach, you should really know your matter, the subject matter, and be able to really, you know, deliver the material with confidence. But they had given me a lady to be in the room when I'm teaching loans. And if, say, you asked a question like, okay, so how much, what's the most amount Washington Mutual does home loans for? I would look at this person and she would give me some kind of clue to what the answer was. It was the worst. Oh my gosh, nobody in the class had respect for me. They were like, why isn't that lady teaching the class? Good
Yeah.
question. I'd like to know too.
Yeah, well, that helped me with working in retail and everything. I was a certified trainer, so I did a lot of the training when I was in retail, and so that gave me a lot of opportunity to stand in front of people and talk. So that helped me when it came time to do comedy too.
Yes, it does. I know that when I was training, I couldn't wait to get to the parts where I could make the material funny. Were you that way too?
No,
No?
but my natural personality is to be a little bit sarcastic. So I mean, I'm always going to have a little bit of whatever it might be when I'm on doing it and saying silly things, or it's just who I am. I'm a very light person, so.
Yeah, you are. Well, gosh, Irwin Loring, thank you again. And remind us of the name of your podcast because I'll get it Listexia style.
Well, yeah, you get it backwards. It's called Stories and Stogies.
Got
It's
it.
on Spotify, it's on Google, it's on iTunes. Been out there for a while. We just actually our most recent interview was with Michael Winslow, so that's out.
Okay. And how long has it been going? How many episodes or
I think we're
seasons?
I think we're in our first season. We're up to I think our 12th episode. We're getting better at it, that's for sure. We're actually picking up on our guests. We're starting to pick up some bigger name guests, which is cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Are you able to say who you have coming up that's a big name?
We're taking a break, so we're really going to do what we're going to do for the next couple months is we've got a lot of cutting room floor stuff. So we're going to start doing some of the best of the stuff you didn't hear. So it's
Oh, cool.
so you'll hear some of this interview stuff that happened like with Kevin Farley and Michael Winslow and those guys that happened when we didn't broadcast, just to kind of give people a chance to see what some of the in-between stuff, because some of the stories they tell on it, they end on the broadcast, but then we had more to the story and we do that on the outtakes.
Oh, I love that. I love outtakes. Do you have a YouTube channel as well?
Oh God, somewhere. I haven't touched it. Yeah, I don't touch my YouTube channel. I don't really post anything. I record my videos and I hate them and I delete them, and I've been trying to get my promo video together and I record it and I hate it and I delete it. I'm my own worst enemy. I mean, I can have a great set and two jokes won't work and I won't want to put anything up. So
Yes, I get it.
I recorded everything at Harvey's. I have it on my computer. I haven't put any of it up.
Oh my gosh, that was a great weekend.
We had fun. It was
Yeah.
interesting. It was interesting. The host was a little bit difficult. That guy that was hosting, we didn't. Tommy and I had a little difficulty with him, but
Yeah,
I
I
think he
don't
was mad.
remember who was.
He was also mad at Tommy because Tommy. I don't know if you knew this, but Tommy and I were both recording audio because we were trying to get it onto Sirius Radio. So there was like three mics in the room, and there was a professional guy recording the audio, and Tommy wouldn't let the host introduce him because he thought the host was so droll and unexciting that he actually had the guest spot introduce him, TC, and then had me introduce him a couple times because he just didn't want the host to introduce him.
Wow. I don't remember who the host was,
I
but
don't
I
either.
know you don't want to
He was
out anybody.
he was a nice enough guy. I mean, it was just he wasn't personable to us. So
Wow. You
nice enough
know,
guy, no issue.
what is something that, like I want to be out there hosting regularly. So, what are some good do's and don'ts that you can rattle off the top of your head from watching people do well and fail at hosting? What are some
First,
tips?
well, the first thing is whenever you host, you always have to engage the audience. That's huge because there are a lot of people when they host, they'll say, "Welcome to such and such club," and then just start telling jokes. I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's really important as a host, one, to just maybe say, who's got a birthday out there, or maybe find a couple of people in the audience and do a couple of things talking to them, or where are people from, and then have something ready to say about it. It doesn't, if a host does 15 minutes, the first 5 minutes, if they jump into their material too quickly, then I learned this from Gallagher when I worked with Gallagher. Gallagher said, you don't start telling jokes till the audience is ready to hear jokes. And when you first walk up and introduce yourself to the audience as the host of the show, the audience is not necessarily ready. They may be still settling into their seats. They may still be getting a drink. They may be still chewing on a piece of food. So when you first get up there, you got to work the room, not necessarily do audience work, but work the room, get them built up to the show, then start telling jokes. Hosting is a different beast than any of the other things you do. Remember, the host to me sets the entire table and the attitude for the whole show. So that's the first thing. One is, as a host, make sure you engage the audience and make sure you introduce the fact that comedy is going to start in it without going right into your jokes. Two is you got to be clean. The host should never be dirty because you can't be the dirtiest person on the show. And that has happened to me where a host went up and was very dirty and I was featuring and the headliner headlining and we were both clean comics. And by the host being dirty, he messed up our sets because now people were kind of put off by the dirty comedy. The same thing happened to me that one I told you I headlined. The first 5 minutes I was on stage, I had to re-engage the audience because the other comics had really upset them with their dirty comedy. So one is, open the show, make sure it's getting ready, make sure people are ready to laugh before you start telling jokes. Don't be dirty. And I guess the big thing after that would be have energy. Just have energy. Be excited to be up there. And that really is a host should be forgettable, but is insanely important. You got to. I guess that's the fourth thing. Remember, you're not the show.
Yeah.
The host has to remember they're not the show. Don't push to get laughs. You're not going to get the biggest laughs. You're the host. People are just getting ready to get going. So there's your biggest piece of advice.
Thank you so much, Irwin Loring. I'm going to sign off and let you have a night with your wife the day after your anniversary. And I thank you so much for being humble enough to let me retape this on good equipment. That's so sweet of you.
It was fun.
Glad we could do it.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.